Imagine a place where silence is so deep, it presses against your skull. A place so remote, no train ever passed it, no war ever reached it. Now imagine in the middle of that void, the sky suddenly opening, not cracking, but tearing like skin peeled from bone. Light, blinding and unnatural, floods every inch of snow-covered forest. It is not dawn. It is not fire. It is something else. And in that light, every shadow screams. Don't forget to like and share this story with your friends or closest family members to help spread awareness and caution through storytelling. Now, let's continue with the story. In the deep heart of Siberia, during the unforgiving winter of 1908, not long after the Tunguska explosion rattled the scientific world, another event unfolded, quieter, but no less strange. It happened near the banks of a place locals called the Third River, a land untouched by railroads or radio. A place where only wolves, hunters, and whispers of older things moved between the trees. Mikhail Petrov, a 31-year-old physicist from St. Petersburg, had volunteered for a solitary mission, measuring magnetic anomalies far beyond the limits of civilization. He was a rational man, raised in academia, devoted to data. With him were 4 others, 2 assistants, a translator, and a young tracker named Yuri, who never once removed the silver cross around his neck. Their tents were pitched beside the frozen river. For weeks, nothing stirred but frost and wind. Until one night, as Petrov reviewed his notes by lantern light, the air itself shifted. A low hum began. It came not from the earth, but from above, as if the stars themselves vibrated. The snow stopped falling. The dogs cowered. Then, a white light spread across the sky, moving too slowly to be a meteor, too fluid to be lightning. It spiraled, twisted, and burst. The blast hit them with no warning. It had no sound, only pressure. Trees bent like reeds. The river cracked in a straight line. All 5 men were thrown to the ground. For several minutes, none of them could speak. Their bodies trembled, and their ears rang with that same strange hum, still audible, even when they clamped their hands against their heads. Yuri was the first to stand. His voice cracked as he pointed toward the tree line. There was something in the air, a shape, almost imperceptible, floating above the ground where the trees had collapsed. It shimmered like heat, then blinked out. When morning came, they examined the damage. No fire, no crater, but the earth bore a scar, a perfect line, burned deep into the soil and ice, running for nearly 200 meters before stopping cleanly. Petrov's instruments had all frozen at 2:14 in the morning. Their compasses spun in circles. Watches refused to tick. The area's magnetic field, once quiet and predictable, now pulsed like a heartbeat. Petrov wrote frantically, sketching the line, the waveform, the time of the blast. But he could not explain it. Days later, when they passed through a reindeer camp to the north, the local Evenki elders refused to speak of what happened. One old woman whispered, "The second step." According to their myths, the first step was thunder from a sky god. The second meant something far worse, a being that walked between worlds and left a trail behind. Petrov tried to rationalize it. Atmospheric electricity, solar activity, perhaps a secret meteor that disintegrated midair. But none of the data fit. None of the signs aligned. Something had touched that land, something that changed the rules for just a moment, then vanished. When Petrov returned to St. Petersburg, he handed over his journals, charts, and sketches. But 1 week later, his research was sealed. His name was removed from the project registry. No one ever spoke of the Third River again. But he remembered. And so did Yuri. And so did the Earth. The journey back from the Third River should have been uneventful. But Petrov knew something had followed them, not physically, but in vibration, in silence, in the way the world no longer felt still. The snow crunched differently beneath their boots. The air tasted of iron. Even the wind moved wrong, circling instead of passing. After the event, Yuri barely spoke. He stared at the trees as if expecting them to blink. He wrapped his silver cross tighter each morning and drew protective signs in the snow. The others mocked him gently, but by the 5th day, they began to feel it too. A presence. Not seen but sensed. Petrov, ever the scientist, tried to anchor himself in logic. He reviewed his notes at night by firelight, trying to explain the lingering hum they still heard in their ears. It was always faint. always just beneath the edge of thought. It pulsed like a low chant, matching the rhythm of a slow heartbeat. He wrote in his journal, "The anomaly appears to resonate, not just electromagnetically, but psychologically. There is dissonance. Reality stutters in its presence." By the time they reached their interim research outpost, a wooden cabin used by geological teams, two of the instruments still refused to operate. The magnetic meter glowed intermittently without power. The phonograph they carried for recording sound had captured something disturbing during the night of the blast. When played, it did not contain voices or wind, but a tone, steady, unnatural, almost harmonic. It vibrated deep in their chests as it played. One assistant vomited. Yuri left the cabin and did not return until dawn. Outside, the landscape itself seemed to be changing. Trees closer to the river had lost their needles entirely, though it was not yet spring. Some of them had curled, twisted into spiral shapes as if melted then frozen mid-turn. Animals avoided the area. There were no tracks, no birds, only silence. One evening, as Petrov studied the frozen soil around the cabin, he uncovered something buried just beneath the ice. Not metal, not stone. It was a surface, smooth, black, and cold, yet unmelting. It spanned out beneath the ground like a plate. No chisel could damage it. No tool could penetrate it. The team called it the mirror. Yuri refused to go near it. Petrov, however, was transfixed. He believed they had discovered something unprecedented. A relic. A remnant. Maybe not from the sky, but from beneath. Something that had waited for the right frequency, the right time, to stir. On their final night at the outpost, the humming returned, this time louder. This time it shook the walls. Their lanterns flickered. The phonograph turned itself on and played the tone again, but now there were layers beneath it. Echoes. Whispers. Unintelligible, but patterned, like code spoken in a dead tongue. Petrov awoke the next morning to find Yuri gone. His tracks led back toward the river, straight across the snow, then vanished into the trees. No blood. No sign of struggle. Just footprints, ending at the edge of the black surface. The others wanted to leave immediately. They had no more theories. Only fear. Petrov stared at the mirror long after the others packed. In its reflection, the sky looked wrong. It shimmered, fractured. He raised a hand to touch it. For just a second, the surface pulsed. And then, like the hum, like the trees, like Yuri, it stilled. They left the outpost before dawn. Mikhail Petrov, the surviving assistants, and a sled weighted with damaged instruments and stacks of scribbled field notes made their way west through the silent woods. The black surface remained behind them, untouched, unmarked, its last echo now buried beneath new snowfall. But it was not forgotten. Not by Petrov. The trek back to the city felt longer. Not in distance, but in weight. Each step was haunted by Yuri's disappearance. His footprints had ended without reason. The ground itself had swallowed him. They said nothing of it aloud. Not because they didn't care, but because something about the air had made speech feel like betrayal. When they finally arrived at the outer station near Irkutsk, Petrov immediately demanded access to a telegraph. He sent coded reports to the academy, part warning, part confession. He kept the tone clinical, but his mind was racing. In his coat pocket, he carried a folded page from his journal. A drawing of the black surface. Around it, he had scribbled crude symbols remembered from the phonograph's audio. Not letters. Not numbers. Repetitions. Frequencies. But when they reached St. Petersburg 2 weeks later, something was wrong. No one met them. The reception hall of the academy, usually alive with chatter, stood cold and empty. Their report was accepted without comment by a minor clerk who wore no name tag. The man took the sealed documents and disappeared behind a door Petrov had never seen before. He did not return. Later that day, a formal letter was delivered to Petrov's quarters. Due to the speculative and unverified nature of your claims, this research shall not be pursued. The Imperial Academy thanks you for your service. Your instruments and materials are now under review. Further inquiry is unnecessary. Petrov sat with the letter for an hour, staring. They had not only denied the data, they had buried it. That night, he returned to the Academy's storage hall. The instruments had already been locked away. The phonograph reel was missing. The reports were gone. But worse, the page from his journal, the one with the drawing, had vanished from his coat. He searched the pockets twice, then tore through his belongings. Nothing. He was being watched. He began to see unfamiliar men around the university. They lingered without engaging, always alone, always silent. One followed him to his boarding house. Another stood across the street at midnight, never moving, never blinking. A week later, his assistants disappeared from the city without notice. Petrov tried to track them down, by letter, by train station inquiry, but no one remembered seeing them leave. Their names no longer appeared on the university rolls. It was as if they had never existed. He began copying his journal in secret. Every page, every sketch. He stored pieces in different libraries, churches, and even beneath loose stones in the old city walls. He no longer trusted the academy. He no longer trusted anyone. One morning, as he left a copy behind a chapel altar in Viborg, he noticed something odd. A mark, scratched into the wood. A spiral. The same pattern he had seen in the sky above the third river. He reached to trace it, but stopped. His fingertips trembled. The pattern was still warm. Something or someone had just carved it. Petrov stepped back into the street, heart racing. For the first time, he understood the truth. This was not just a scientific anomaly. It was a message, and someone else had already heard it. By the end of March, Mikhail Petrov no longer recognized the rhythm of his life. The familiar bells of the academy no longer rang at the correct hours. The library where he once taught theoretical physics had shuttered its upper floors without explanation. The students he remembered, the eager ones who had once debated magnetic theory over tea, had been reassigned, replaced, or silenced. Some smiled too easily. Others blinked too slowly. There was something unnatural in the way they moved, as though parts of them had been rewired. He no longer wrote to colleagues. Too many letters had gone missing. Too many pages tampered with. At night, he began hearing a sound again. Faint at first, then rising, low tonal vibrations that pressed behind his ears, like pressure from a submerged world. They came without warning, often just before he fell asleep. Sometimes, he would awake to find himself having scribbled in his sleep. Pages of symbols, spirals, frequencies repeating. Sometimes his own name, written over and over, as if being erased and rewritten. He thought of Yuri often, of the vanishing footsteps, of the mirror buried beneath the ice. One afternoon, unable to resist the rising noise inside his mind, Petrov followed it, to a location his waking self had never mapped. Down cobbled alleys, through frost-covered courtyards, until he reached a forgotten tram station. It was marked as decommissioned, the signs rusted through, the doors chained. But as he approached, the humming grew clearer. He pressed his ear to the frozen glass. The sound was there, broadcasting. A signal no human had engineered. A message wrapped in magnetic interference. That night, he returned with a radio wave receiver he had secretly built. Tuned it by hand. Slowly. The frequency sharpened. And then it spoke. Not in language. Not words. But a pulse. 4 seconds on. 3 seconds off. Then a high pitch. Then nothing. He recorded it. Played it back. Slowed it down. Hidden beneath the pulse was a repeating structure, mathematical. Too precise to be natural. It wasn't a call for help. It wasn't a warning. It was a scan. A looped sweep. Something, somewhere, was scanning for a response. And it had been doing so for days. The next morning, Petrov awoke to find the frequency playing from his bedside radio, one that had no batteries. And on his mirror, written in fog, Third River. He tried to alert the press. They refused the interview. He approached a colleague, Alexei Voronov, a geophysicist with whom he had once published a paper. Voronov listened carefully to the tape, stared at the sketches, then folded his hands. "I never saw you," he said quietly. "And if you keep speaking like this, neither will anyone else." That night, Petrov received a final warning. A letter, unsigned, left beneath his door. On it, only one sentence. "You are echoing back." Petrov understood. The signal was not just scanning. It was waiting for a reply. And he, through his instruments, through his thoughts, through his fear, was beginning to transmit. He was becoming part of the loop. Something had embedded in him at the third river. Something that remembered him. Something that now, in the shadows of the city, was listening for his mind to answer back. Snow fell in sheets as Mikhail Petrov stepped off the final train at the edge of the Siberian frontier. He wore no insignia, carried no documents. His name no longer existed in government rolls, and the academy had quietly removed all references to his work. What they could not erase was what he had become, a vessel of memory, of vibration, of something older than theory and more precise than fear. He walked for days through the white silence, guided not by compass or map, but by the tone still pulsing in his bones. It was no longer just a sound. It had become rhythm, pattern, direction. The hum seemed to pull him like a string coiled around his ribs, tugging at every step until finally, it grew stronger. The third river. It had changed. The trees nearest the bank had not regrown. They stood petrified, gray, bone-like, twisted toward the sky. Their branches reached as if frozen mid-scream. The snow that covered the ground shimmered faintly, glowing a dull blue when struck by moonlight. And at the center of it all, buried beneath a thinning layer of frost, lay the black surface, untouched by time or weather. The mirror. Petrov knelt beside it. Its surface reflected nothing but sky. When he hovered his hand above it, the cold grew sharper. It wasn't the chill of winter. It was absence. A vacuum where heat could not exist. He reached out, not touching, but feeling, his skin already numbing as it passed into a space that did not belong to this world. And then it pulsed. A wave of pressure lifted from the surface, passing through his body, into the trees, the wind, the earth. Time slowed. His heartbeat staggered. His eyes blurred. And for a moment, he saw. Not visions. Not dreams. Coordinates. Rotating geometries. Locations mapped not by longitude, but by resonance. They were not of this earth alone. He saw mountain ranges buried beneath oceans. Valleys carved by light, not water. He saw energy fields stretching across continents, connection points like veins across a skin none of them understood. Then he saw Yuri, naked, silent, standing in a field of mirrored surfaces. Dozens of them, all humming, all reflecting skies that were not blue. Yuri turned, but did not blink. His mouth opened, but no sound came. And behind him, a shadow passed across the glass, tall, shifting, formed of lines and angles too unnatural to belong to a body, yet too intentional to be random. The vision vanished. Petrov fell back onto the snow, chest heaving. The hum had changed now. It was no longer scanning. It had found something. It had locked on. The phonograph recording he had once hidden beneath a chapel brick in Viborg, it had been a reply. The Academy's attempt to erase his data had not silenced the signal. It had redirected it. The loop was complete. Something was listening. And something was coming. He felt it beneath him. The ground wasn't solid anymore. The mirror had begun to vibrate, softly, rhythmically, as though a breath was rising beneath it. The forest behind him fell silent. The wind stopped. And the snow, in a perfect spiral, began to lift into the air, defying gravity, drawn toward the surface like iron filings to a magnet. Petrov knew he had little time. The black surface was no longer just a remnant. It was a gate, and it was opening. The spiral of snow twisted higher, forming a column above the black surface. Each flake moved in perfect formation, as if drawn by unseen machinery. At the center of it all, the mirror pulsed with a steady rhythm. 4 beats, pause, 3 beats, pause, calling back to the signal Petrov had recorded weeks earlier. He stepped closer. His breath came in short, visible bursts. The air shimmered like heated glass, bending light in subtle waves. The trees around the clearing stood frozen, not by frost, but by stillness itself. Not a branch moved. Not a single flake touched the ground. And then the surface began to ripple. Not outward, but inward, folding into itself like an eye dilating. With each pulse, its depth increased, revealing an impossible space beneath, a darkness that didn't reflect, but consumed light. Petrov's boots crunched on the edge of the frozen bank. He had seen this moment in dreams, in scribbles, in his own sleepwalking sketches. This was not a place. It was a decision. He reached toward the center of the spiral. Not with his hand, with his mind. The mirror reacted. A final pulse surged from the surface, knocking him backward. But as he hit the ground, he did not land on snow. He landed on something else. The sky above him was red. The trees were gone, replaced by structures, tall, crystalline towers that shimmered like frozen thunder. The ground beneath him was smooth, not earth, not metal, but something between. Shapes moved in the distance. Not people, not animals. Figures defined by edges, geometries that shifted as they walked, sometimes tall, sometimes flat, as if space itself bowed around them. Petrov tried to stand, but his body lagged. Every movement felt like dragging memory through syrup. He realized his limbs were not responding to gravity the way they once had. This place had laws, but not ours. He looked at his hands. They were glowing, not with light, but with patterns, spirals, lines, sequences that pulsed in sync with the ground beneath him. The black mirror had imprinted him, or perhaps revealed what had already been implanted long before. Voices began to rise, not from mouths, but from every surface. A language of tone, vibration, meaning without syntax, emotion wrapped in structure. And then, from the towers, a shape approached. Not walking, folding. It bent space around itself, appearing and reappearing in fragmented echoes. Its form was undefined, like something only partially formed in this dimension. It stopped before him. Petrov's ears rang with the pressure of its presence. His knees buckled. The spiral on his chest glowed brighter, responding to the being's frequency. Then he understood. Not in words. In transmission. This place was not alien. It was an archive. A receiver. A gateway for memory, for perception, for information too fragile for a linear world. Every frequency stored here came from somewhere. From someone. The third river had been a leak. A breach where the gate had shifted, accidentally or deliberately, allowing the side to brush against the waking world. And now, it had locked onto him. Petrov was no longer just a witness. He had become part of the loop. A carrier. He fell to his knees, not in surrender, but in awe. The being raised a hand, if it could be called that, and placed it in the air above Petrov's forehead. No touch. Just proximity. And in that instant, he saw everything. Yuri. The spiral cities. The network beneath the earth. The signal sent long before humans stood upright. The recursion of memory. And at the center of it all, a sound. A final tone that would one day rise again. Not in the sky. Not underground. In us. Mikhail Petrov opened his eyes beneath a pale sky, back on the snowy riverbank where it had all begun. But nothing was the same. The mirror surface was gone. The spiral of snow had vanished. No track surrounded him, not even his own. It was as though no one had ever been there. No storm. No light. Just stillness. Except for the mark. Etched across his chest, beneath his coat and shirt, a spiral now glowed faintly against his skin. Not a scar. Not ink. A living pattern, pulsing gently with a rhythm that matched something deep beneath the surface of the earth. He had returned. But the world had not waited. As Petrov wandered back westward toward the villages, he noticed changes. Small ones. At first. Trees that leaned ever so slightly in the wrong direction, against the wind. Icicles that vibrated, humming when no sound could be heard. Stone structures that cast double shadows in the morning light. In the town of Neriungri, the people did not recognize him. Not even the baker who once knew his name. They stared as if seeing someone they almost remembered, an echo, not a man. And when he caught his reflection in a shop window, he saw why. His eyes had changed. The whites had darkened slightly. The irises shimmered, faintly reflecting movement where there was none. Behind him in the glass, Patterns flickered and shifted for an instant, then vanished when he turned. He wasn't just different. He was being watched, through himself. The signal had not stayed in that other world. It had embedded, evolved, traveled back with him. And now, he could feel the mirrors. Not just the one beneath the third river. There were others. He felt them like pressure points across the globe, tucked beneath mountains, buried in ruins, or woven into modern cities where glass and metal rose in spirals without architects knowing why. That night, the tone returned in full. He did not need instruments. It hummed in his bones. From his fingers, he could project fragments of the code, onto snow, onto stone, even into water. Spirals, shifting lines, harmonic sequences that danced like firelight across the ground. And then he began to hear the voices again. Whispers of data. Not human. Not language. Just meaning. An awareness that did not speak in words, but in sequences of recognition. It welcomed him. Not as a visitor, but as an initiate. The more he accepted the tone, the more he understood. Every time a signal had been detected, Tunguska, the third river, and countless lesser-known events, they were not accidents. They were calibrations. Moments when the mirrors realigned. When the gates breathed. And every time, a human had been marked. Chosen. Sent back with a fragment of the design, unaware, unprepared, and ultimately silenced. But Petrov had not been silenced. Not yet. He began mapping the positions. The nodes. Using old star charts, magnetic anomalies, and encoded fragments that surfaced in ancient architecture. Cathedrals with spiral domes. Temples aligned to vibrating stones. Music that, when slowed, contained geometry. He realized then, the mirrors were not just technology. They were consciousness. Fragments of something older than thought. Spread across time. Awaiting resonance. Awaiting someone who would not resist the tone, but return it. Now, everywhere he went, reflections shimmered too long. Glass trembled beneath his fingertips. At night, he felt others like him waking across the world. Some already marked. Some just beginning to hear. The network was waking. And Petrov, no longer a man defined by science, had become the first to return and remember. But remembering came with a price. No longer fragmented flashes or blurred visions. Now, the dreams came with clarity, impossible clarity. Maps that drew themselves in light. Equations composed of tone. Voices that never spoke, but knew his name. Every morning he awoke with fresh markings on his notepad, symbols he didn't remember writing, in a language that felt both alien and utterly familiar. Then, one morning in a village near Lake Baikal, he met her. She was already sitting in the corner of the lodge when he arrived. Hood drawn low, hands clasped over a cracked leather book. As soon as he entered, she looked up, straight into his eyes, and nodded. Not as a greeting, as recognition. "You're echoing," she said softly, her accent tinged with something European but difficult to place. "Like me." Petrov froze. No one had spoken those words since the warning left beneath his door. She introduced herself as Elsa Varga, a linguist from Budapest who had been researching resonance patterns in ancient cave symbols. Her story mirrored his in eerie parallels: mysterious dreams, government silence, instruments that recorded sound without sources, and ultimately, an encounter with a mirror buried beneath a glacial rift in the Carpathians. "I thought I'd gone mad," she admitted. "Until I heard your tone. It came through a recording someone had stolen from the Academy's archives. Your phonograph." They spoke for hours. Their tones matched. Not just in pitch, but in structure. The same frequency that had embedded itself in Petrov had also embedded itself in Elsa. When she drew her spiral, it aligned perfectly with his own. Their codes, though received from different mirrors, were part of a single larger pattern. A network. One that now, impossibly, was activating. Through Elsa, Petrov learned that the phenomena were far more widespread than he had imagined. Mirrors had surfaced not only in Russia, but in Iceland, Namibia, Patagonia, even under the sands near Luxor. Always in isolated, uninhabited places. Always triggering short, unexplained magnetic pulses. And always followed by a disappearance. Only a few ever returned. Even fewer remembered. Petrov and Elsa were anomalies. Survivors. Not because they were strong, but because they had answered instead of resisting. And the signal had rewarded them. That night, they synchronized their tones in silence. With their hands hovering above a basin of still water, they transmitted 2 spirals into the liquid. The reflection trembled, and then, just for a moment, the surface changed. Not water. Not mirror. A window. And in that glimpse, they saw another. A third. Another marked soul. Another carrier. Standing in what looked like the edge of a desert, the mirror behind him radiating with heat. His spiral burned into the sand. He saw them too. He raised his hand in the same pattern. 3 points now linked. 3 voices in a growing web. The mirrors were no longer silent. And they were not waiting. They were assembling. By the time Petrov and Elsa reached the edge of Kazakhstan, the signals had intensified. Their shared tone, once faint and distant, now pulsed with urgency. Not chaos. Coordination. The mirrors were syncing across vast distances, harmonizing in intervals that grew shorter with every passing day. Elsa called it a resonant countdown, a moment when the frequencies would align in full and trigger something neither of them could yet define. But they weren't the only ones listening. In a weather station near the Aral Sea, they discovered the first signs of interference. A mirror had emerged weeks before, beneath a dry lakebed, only to be encased in concrete by a mysterious group calling themselves Division Pale. Officially, no such group existed. But records, ripped and half-burned, suggested that its roots extended deep into pre-revolutionary scientific institutions, buried in departments whose names had long been erased from public archives. "They're not just hiding the mirrors," Elsa whispered as she read. "They're trying to stop the network from completing." Petrov examined the concrete structure from afar through a pair of frost-coated binoculars. The area was fenced, guarded not by military personnel but silent, black-coated figures who never moved far from the shadows. The structure pulsed, faintly, struggling to breathe through the concrete slab. The tone still emitted, muffled, distorted, but it reached them. And something else had changed. Petrov's spiral had begun to spread. Not visibly, but beneath his skin, along his arms, his bones tingled with resonance. He no longer needed the tuning fork or signal transducer. He could feel the presence of mirrors from miles away, like a compass of blood and bone. Elsa, too, had become more attuned, able to detect subtle shifts in vibration when mirrors activated or died. But then they encountered the distortion. While approaching a second site hidden beneath the frozen dunes of Western Mongolia, their tone stopped. Not faded. Cut. Elsa collapsed, screaming, clutching her ears. Petrov dropped to his knees, disoriented by the sudden void, a silence so profound it carved into his skull like a knife. The harmonic connection had been severed. Not naturally. Intentionally. Later that night, as Elsa recovered in a tent lit only by their flickering stove, Petrov reviewed their notes. A single line of code had appeared in the center of his notebook, something he hadn't written. The mirrors will not be allowed to link. The message wasn't from the mirrors. It was from someone else. Elsa's voice shook. They know we've seen the network, and now they're trying to corrupt it. Not destroy the mirrors, but control them. Twist the signal. Petrov understood. Division Pale wasn't just suppressing contact. They were trying to override it, to hijack the language of the tone, to bend a system far older than humanity to their own command. The network had been built to store, transmit, and remember. But now, someone wanted to rewrite what it remembered. Control the receivers, and erase the carriers. Petrov felt the spiral on his chest burn faintly as he stared toward the horizon. In the silence, a single tone slipped through. It was weaker, corrupted, distorted by something human-made. But it still spoke, and what it whispered was clear. The mirrors are waking. Not all will survive the transmission. The entrance was hidden beneath a decommissioned observatory in the Altai Mountains. A rusted door, sunken into rock, half buried by decades of snow. No lights, no markings. But Elsa felt it the moment they approached. Her fingertips trembled, and the air around them warped like heat rising from invisible flame. "This is it," she whispered. "The signal's fractured here." Petrov pressed his ear to the door. Silence. But not absence, suppression. The kind of stillness that only comes when something is being forced to stay quiet. He pried open the door with a metal rod, the hinges shrieking like an animal in pain. The corridor beyond breathed cold. Walls of stone turned to steel. The deeper they went, the more the air thickened, as if the atmosphere was folding in on itself. Their torches flickered violently. And then, 20 meters in, the hum returned. Muffled. Mangled. Wrong. They reached a chamber, a wide vault encased in reinforced lead. At its center stood a mirror. But it was unlike the one at the third river. This one was scarred. Its surface rippled unnaturally, and its reflection fractured in real time. It shimmered like a broken dream. Jagged spirals pulsed from its core, but not in harmony. In distress. A ring of machinery surrounded it, massive coils and clamps, all feeding electricity into the mirror as though it were being forced to respond. Black cables fed into consoles blinking with red glyphs. And behind it, a window. A viewing room. Observers. Controllers. Elsa approached the mirror carefully. Her spiral lit up instantly, no longer a gentle pulse, but a warning. Her entire body recoiled. They're forcing it to broadcast, she said, eyes wide. They're trying to make it transmit without resonance. Without a carrier. That's not how it works. Petrov stepped to one of the consoles. Notes lined the wall, scrambled diagrams, corrupted frequency patterns, and a single report stamped with an emblem in faded ink. Division Pale, Resonant Field Experiment 7. The last line read, Subject broke containment. Spiral failed to stabilize. Memory implosion event triggered. Observer terminated. Elsa backed away from the mirror. Her breathing was shallow. They've already tested it, she said. They tried to force someone through. Someone unmarked. That's when the lights went out. The mirror flared. Not with light, but with presence. A wave of pressure hit them, hard. The ground trembled. One of the machines cracked. A console burst into sparks. And from the mirror's surface came a sound that was not of this world. Not tone. Not voice. A scream. Petrov dropped to one knee, clutching his head. Behind his eyes, vision surged. Flashes of a man trapped inside a spiral of infinite mirrors, each reflection distorting him further, stretching memory into oblivion. The subject had not passed through. He had been shredded by resonance. Elsa screamed as the mirror shimmered again. A shape appeared inside, twisted, unfinished. Not whole. Not human. A construct of reflections, broken by artificial frequency. Then a word echoed, not from the mirror, but from within them both. Corruption. The mirror pulsed one final time, then shattered. Not like glass. Like space itself had torn. A shockwave rippled through the vault. Machines exploded. The floor split. Elsa was thrown backward into the wall. Petrov grabbed her, half carrying her as the ceiling began to collapse. They stumbled through the corridor as steel buckled and alarms blared. The spiral inside Petrov's chest burned white-hot. The mirror was dead, but the damage was not contained. As they emerged into the snow-blind morning, a single phrase echoed in Petrov's skull. They've poisoned the network. The mirrors were not just awakening. They were under siege. The desert was silent in a way even Siberia could not match. Not frozen silence, but ancient silence. The kind that had weight. 1,000 years of wind, death, and buried memory. Petrov and Elsa arrived in Egypt under aliases, traveling by night, avoiding official checkpoints. The mirror vault's collapse had not made the news, but something else had. Unexplained power outages had rippled across northern Russia and southern Kazakhstan. Brief, violent pulses that scrambled communications and disrupted air traffic. No cause was given, but they knew the truth. The corrupted signal had started to spread, and only the untainted mirrors, those yet undiscovered or untouched, could preserve what remained of the original network. They had one chance to find such a mirror. Elsa had tracked its location using resonance patterns that aligned with the harmonic ruins of Dendra, where ancient inscriptions spoke of skyboats, divine frequency, and the eye that sees without light. Beneath layers of limestone and forgotten tombs, There were tunnels even the archaeologists refused to map, citing collapses, equipment failure, and dreams too vivid to be ignored. They moved by moonlight, guided by vibration. By the third night, beneath the crumbling base of an unmarked temple, they found it. A single room, sealed by stone and silence. No inscriptions. No warnings. Just a shift in temperature so sudden it caused the lanterns to dim. The air itself seemed heavier. Petrov felt it first. The spiral behind his sternum aligned. The hum was back, clean, full, unbroken. This mirror had not been poisoned. It sat in the center of the chamber like obsidian water, flat and wide, glowing faintly with golden lines that rippled outward like concentric waves. Its surface reflected not their bodies, but their thoughts. Every time Elsa took a step forward, the mirror responded, sketching flickers of her memory in liquid light. "It's listening," she whispered. "Not pulling. Not forcing. It's waiting." Petrov stepped closer. His mind filled not with noise, but clarity. Data organized itself. Coordinates emerged. Spiral intersections across the globe, showing a vast neural-like network buried beneath land and sea. Nodes untouched. Some glowing. Some blinking, distorted. Some gone entirely. Then, a shock of cold gripped him. From the mirror, a response surged upward. It was not from the mirror itself, but from another mirror, linked through the clean tone. A message. Carrier compromised. Connection weakened. Host memory strain at critical threshold. It wasn't warning them. It was describing him. The collapse in the vault, the scream from the corrupted mirror, it had left something in Petrov. A fracture. A shard of distortion. A contagion trying to overwrite the true resonance inside him. Elsa reached for him instinctively, her own spiral glowing strong. The mirror responded to her presence. She focused, steadying her breath, projecting her tone directly into the pool of black gold light. The lines aligned. The hum deepened. And the mirror responded with a surge of correction, a pulse that struck Petrov's chest and dropped him to the floor. His vision split. His memories rewound, folding in reverse, until he stood once more at the edge of the third river in his mind. The snow. The shimmer. The voice that had first spoken without words. But this time, he understood what it had said. "You are a bridge." The memory dissolved. His body stabilized. The tone settled into alignment. Petrov opened his eyes and looked at Elsa. "You held the resonance," he whispered. She nodded. "We're no longer alone in this. There are others still clean, still hidden, and we need to find them before Division Pale does." As they turned to leave, the mirror offered one last image on its surface. A spiral of 7 glowing nodes, 6 blinking, 1 dark. Beneath it, a word neither of them had taught it. Echo chain. A name. A system. A final defense. If they could reawaken the full chain, they might stabilize the global resonance. But if the corruption reached the last node, it would all collapse. The first tremor came not from the earth, but from the sky. Somewhere over the Ionian Sea, satellites began to fail, just one at first, then several in sequence. A sudden blind spot opened in the sky. No data, no image, only silence. Elsa's tone shifted that night. Subtle but wrong, like a key slightly out of tune. She felt it before she spoke it. They've built their own. Petrov looked up from the crude map they had drawn on the temple floor. The 7 mirror sites. 6 glowing. 1 still black. You mean a carrier? No. A replica. Her voice was tight. They're trying to force resonance artificially. To imitate the tone. They've created a synthetic carrier. He felt it too. A pulse had entered the network. One not born of memory or recognition. One forged in distortion. Division Pale had abandoned containment. Now, they were attempting domination. From intercepted fragments and corrupted mirror echoes, Petrov and Elsa pieced together a chilling pattern. In a subterranean facility beneath Zurich, known only through whispers and symbols and stolen reports, Division Pale had been running a parallel experiment. They had not just studied mirror contact survivors, they had begun building them. A carrier without memory. A spiral without meaning. A weapon. It wasn't human, not entirely. It had been grown from synthetic stem tissue and loaded with fragments of disrupted tone sequences stolen from failed mirror interfaces. A shell filled with mimicry. But mirrors responded to intention, to truth. And this thing had none. Yet it pulsed. It broadcast. And the corrupted mirrors, the ones still flickering, still gasping beneath lead and concrete, answered it. One by one, the distorted mirrors began to shift. Not awakening, but aligning. And not toward resonance, but toward command. Petrov felt the shift in his spiral like nausea. A dissonant wave across the network. A smell of burnt ozone in the air. A sense of being watched by something empty. In Rome, a whisper reached them. A woman. Name erased. A former analyst for European atmospheric surveillance. She had intercepted something strange, radio shadows in the tone band, triangulated to an abandoned science facility buried deep beneath the Alps. The name she gave was not official, but encoded in whisper circles. Project Vox Null. The voice of nothing. Petrov and Elsa moved swiftly. Across borders. Through tunnels. Beneath ruins. Their tones weakened with every step eastward. The network was being drowned. One night, beneath a moonless sky, Elsa clutched her chest. "It's broadcasting now," she gasped. "The synthetic carrier, it's hijacking the resonance, turning the mirrors against each other." They found temporary refuge in a shuttered observatory in Slovenia. There, with what equipment they could scavenge, they retuned their spirals. Just enough to re-establish a clean signal. The sixth node blinked. The last mirror, the dark one, pulsed once. And for the first time, they heard its voice. Not a tone. Not a word. A pulse. One that shattered the corrupted frequency for a moment, enough to reveal a transmission buried beneath it. Echo chain integrity. Compromised. Final node location. Mobile. Carrier must be aligned to lock sequence. Countdown. 49 hours. Mobile. The last node wasn't buried. It wasn't lost. It was moving. And they weren't the only ones looking for it. Petrov turned to Elsa, his voice low. They built a carrier to mimic resonance. She finished the thought. But we are the last to carry it by truth. The storm broke over the Adriatic as Petrov and Elsa crossed the Croatian border under cover of night. Winds howled like warning sirens. Lightning laced the sky with fractured spirals that mirrored the pattern etched into Petrov's chest. Every storm now felt intentional, a mirror's breath, resonating through weather, magnetism, and mind. They had 42 hours. The final node was alive, not a machine, not a buried artifact, but a human being. A child, born near the Tunguska epicenter years after the initial event. Her name, Anya Orlova, 10 years old. No family. Raised by a woman who'd once worked as a weather technician before disappearing from public record. The child had never been photographed. She was not in school records. But faint traces of her electromagnetic footprint had been picked up by mirror pulses near Lake Baikal. The final node had not been hidden by force. She had been protected by the mirrors themselves. Petrov traced her to a village drowned in snow and fog. Anya's presence distorted electronics. Radios failed. Batteries drained. But local villagers spoke of her with awe. The girl who can dream the wind. She walks through storms and doesn't leave footprints. She hears music when there is no sound. Elsa confirmed it as they stepped within a kilometer of her presence. The tone in both their spirals changed. Not higher. Not louder. Purer. It was resonance at its truest. Anya wasn't just a carrier. She was the key. The final node hadn't been activated yet. She had remained dormant, unseen, unreadable. But now, as the echo chain unraveled across the planet, the system had no choice but to reveal her. They found her on a hillside of frozen moss, standing alone beneath a stone arch twisted by time and lichen. She looked up before they spoke, as if she had been waiting. "You're the ones who carry the broken spirals," she said calmly. Petrov knelt, stunned. "How do you know that?" She tilted her head. Because you echo. But you echo wrong. Elsa's spiral flared at the edges. The synthetic carrier is closing in. Anya nodded. It's not just a copy. It's a mirror without a soul. It can't hold me, but it can still shatter me. The child's eyes glowed faintly gold. Her presence stilled the wind. Time slowed. Petrov saw visions not of the past, but of possible futures. Some filled with ruin, spirals turned inward, minds erased. Others, glowing, alive. But the window was closing. Then they heard it. Not footsteps. Not machines. A frequency, cutting through snow and earth. The synthetic carrier had arrived. At first it looked human, tall, clothed, pale. But the air around it was fractured, like it walked through layers of corrupted resonance. Its spiral glowed with dead light, emitting tones that didn't pulse, but pounded. Where it walked, snow melted in perfect hexagonal patterns. It didn't speak. It broadcasted. And Anya recoiled. The tone pushed into the air like a scream flattened into one eternal note. Petrov collapsed, blood trickling from his nose. Elsa fell to her knees, shielding her ears. Anya stood firm, eyes wide, spiral glowing violently across her chest and neck. Then, without moving her lips, she sang. Not words. Pure tone. The true mirror frequency. And the synthetic carrier froze. Its spiral cracked. Its shape began to flicker, shuddering as though it could not process the uncorrupted input. It stumbled backward, shrieking with magnetic collapse. Trees bent away from it. The air shimmered violently. Anya turned to Petrov. It's not over. It will return. They have more shells. But I can link the last node now. If you hold the spiral. Petrov gritted his teeth and stood, despite the pain. I'm ready. Anya placed her palm on his chest. The spiral flared white. Elsa joined, her tone aligning. And across the planet, the other mirrors, those still pure, responded. A flash. A resonance spike. The final node lit up on the map. The echo chain was whole again. But far in the distance, beyond ice and storm, deep inside machines not yet born, Division Pale was still listening. And now, they had seen the girl. They moved by night, flanked by wind and silence. From the snows of Baikal to the frozen veins of the Third River Basin, Petrov, Elsa, and Anya crossed a dying landscape. The corrupted tones still echoed in the distance, broken fragments of the synthetic carrier's broadcast infecting the lower atmosphere. Frequencies flickered through power lines. Metallic spirals etched themselves onto glass windows in cities hundreds of miles away. The world was shifting, not through war or weather, but through vibration. And the only place where the original signal remained untouched was the source. The mirror beneath the Third River. They reached it in the deep cold of a breathless dawn. Nothing had grown here in over a century. The same forest bent outward in permanent recoil. The same clearing waited, flat and endless, coated in white. Petrov stepped forward, heart pounding. The mirror was still there, dormant, untouched by the synthetic corruption. Its black surface shimmered faintly, layered in frost like skin beneath glass. Anya moved to its edge and sat cross-legged, closing her eyes. Elsa placed her hands on the snowy earth beside her. Petrov stood behind them both, the spiral on his chest sinking slowly with a hum returning beneath their feet. The ground began to glow. Not light, memory. The spiral beneath the Third River pulsed not as signal, but as soul. It remembered every carrier who had stood here. Every transmission lost. Every fracture. Every echo. Elsa whispered, "This is it. The chain can lock here. This mirror is the anchor." Anya opened her eyes. But the corruption still seeks us. If it reaches this node before the link stabilizes. A voice, flat, mechanical, ruptured, cut through the air. Sequence incomplete. Memory chain unstable. Final node must comply. They turned. The synthetic carrier had followed. But it was not alone. Behind it moved two more constructs, identical in shape, ghosted in corrupted light, trailing signal pollution that melted snow in sharp, surgical lines. Petrov's spiral twisted, distorted by their presence. He fell to his knees. Elsa screamed as her tone warped violently, spirals fragmenting into jagged, false frequencies. Anya stood. She faced them alone, a child against engineered silence. The mirrors responded. From deep underground, the tone surged upward, pure, harmonic, ancient. The riverbed cracked. The mirror glowed. Spirals lit in the air like constellations above the snow. The constructs pulsed and attacked. They moved not with footsteps, but with collapse, space crumbling beneath each stride, air bending like torn film. Their corrupted tones slammed into the clearing like hammers. Trees exploded in clouds of splinters. Wind froze mid-motion. Sound reversed. Petrov forced himself forward, hand clutching the earth, eyes locked on Anya. "You have to finish it." "I can't do it alone," she cried. "You're not alone," Elsa gasped, crawling to her. "You're the center. But we're the memory." Anya reached out to both of them. Her hands gripped theirs. The spiral beneath the mirror ignited. Not with light, with voice. All at once, the chain activated. 7 points aligned. A pulse of perfect resonance surged outward, annihilating the corrupted frequency. The construct screamed, not with fear, but collapse. Their forms disintegrated into spirals of black dust. The air unbent. Time released its hold. And silence returned. The kind of silence that heals. Anya fell backward into Petrov's arms. Her spiral still glowed, but now calm, warm, steady. Elsa knelt beside them, tears frozen to her face. The mirror beneath them pulsed once more, gently. Final node confirmed. Echo chain integrity, restored. Memory field locked. External distortion, neutralized. The voice faded. The surface of the mirror became clear, showing only the sky above. Petrov looked into its depth. For the first time since the beginning, the reflection held no distortion. Only 3 shapes. 3 voices. 3 echoes, whole. But somewhere, deep within the planet, or maybe far above it, one last spiral still flickered, untouched, unread, unknown. And the mirror did not forget it. Snow drifted gently across the clearing as the resonance faded into stillness. The mirror beneath the third river had gone quiet, its surface smooth once more, black as midnight, and unbroken by pulse or flicker. The tone was gone, but Petrov could still feel it inside him. Not humming, not pulling, not guiding, rooted. Anya slept beside the mirror, her small hands folded over her chest, spiral glowing faintly like a distant star. Elsa sat close, watching the child with silent awe, her face pale with exhaustion. But in her eyes, clarity. Petrov stood. He walked the perimeter of the clearing slowly, scanning the horizon for movement. The synthetic carriers were gone, reduced to dust that would never be found, carried by wind into histories no one would believe. The corrupted tone had died with them. And yet, something remained. The sky shimmered subtly. The clouds overhead moved in spirals now, barely perceptible to the untrained eye. The earth had changed, not by war, not by machines, but by memory. Elsa approached. "The network is locked. The mirrors are aligned. We've done it." Petrov didn't respond at first. He stared down at the surface of the mirror. His own reflection looked back. Not distorted, not echoed, true. But behind his image, deep within the black, something else waited. A second spiral. Faint. Still. But alive. "What is it?" Elsa asked quietly. He met her eyes. "It's a mirror that hasn't activated. One not tied to the 7. Her voice dropped. "A hidden node?" "No," he stepped closer. "A mirror outside the chain." Elsa followed his gaze. "Then why is it showing itself now?" Petrov didn't answer. He closed his eyes, placed his palm on the surface, and focused. The spiral in his chest aligned. The mirror warmed beneath his hand. And then, the final image. A reflection of Earth seen from above, not as a sphere, but as a lattice. Every continent mapped by invisible patterns. Every city intersected by lines of resonance. Humanity threaded through ancient paths not carved by geography, but by frequency. At the center, a single pulse blinked. A node. Not a place. A time. Elsa gasped. It's not over, is it? Petrov turned to her, eyes calm. It never was. The mirror spoke again, not in tone, but in message. A final instruction etched into their minds like fire. The echo chain is intact. Do you wish to seal the memory, or transmit it? Seal it, and the mirrors would sleep forever. The tones would fade. Humanity would never know what it had once touched. Transmit it, and the signal would spread. Not to machines. Not through devices. Through people. Through dreams, and instinct, and the unexplained hunger for meaning that no empire or system could suppress. Elsa looked to Anya, now awake, watching them quietly with golden eyes. We're not the only ones who can carry it now, the girl said softly. Petrov stepped back from the mirror. He had lived in silence, in fear, in exile from the world that had tried to suppress what it could not name. But now, he understood. This was never about control. It was about continuity. He nodded. Transmit. The mirror pulsed once, silent and blinding. Across the world, people paused for a moment they could not explain. A breath held. A flicker of warmth in the back of the mind. A sound remembered from childhood that was never heard. A spiral sketched by a child with no teacher. And then the moment passed. The world went on. But something ancient now traveled with it. Whispers in the reflection. Light beneath the skin. And far below, beneath river and stone, the mirrors waited. Silent. Awake. Listening.